should we be eating? Um, well, I think we all know that we should be eating whole grains, healthy fats, healthy proteins, and most importantly, more fruits and vegetables. We should drink water instead of sugary beverages, and this is basically common knowledge. So, is this different than what we're actually eating? Um, if so, why do you think that we eat differently than what we should be eating? And I think the answer really lies in a different question, which is, why do we eat? And I would love to hear some of your responses. I think that some of the main reasons why we eat, number one, is so that we feel nourished physically. The second is so that sometimes we want to nourish ourselves emotionally. Food can do that to us. Sometimes we eat because we're bored and we just don't have an activity to do. And sometimes we eat because eating replaces something that we're missing in our lives. And I think another reason why we eat is sometimes our body just craves specific foods, and sometimes the nutrients in that food provide us with things that we are missing. Finally, the reason why we eat is because our food centers around family. We want to connect with family and friends. A lot of times the chagim are centered around our seudot, our meals, and we eat because of that. We want to connect with God through our meals. Okay. Now, are these all wrong reasons to eat? Is it wrong to eat even if we want to eat emotionally? And I think it really depends. It depends on if it's getting in our way, if it's impacting our lives in ways that it shouldn't, if it's causing us to have an unhealthy weight. Sometimes eating for all these other reasons other than nutrition involves healthy emotions and experiencing them. And I don't think we should not eat because we have those emotions with them. The trick is to recognize when it's actually a problem. If we're misusing food for unhealthy reasons, or if our eating is resulting in unhealthy consequences, that might be a reason to really question our eating habits. And I wanted to ask you pose a question. What does it mean to eat mindfully? Well, mindfulness is about fully engaging in the present moment completely and wholly. When we're eating mindfully, we try to, as much as possible, engage with the eating experience as fully as possible, and to create as much awareness of why we are eating, how we eat, and what we want the purpose of eating to be. And what's so great about eating mindfully is that it helps us to become much more aware of when we are eating unhealthfully, and if we need to take action based on that. So, how do we develop mindful eating practices? Before we eat, let's try to be aware of when our body craves food. Are there specific triggers that we have? Is it always hunger that's creating this trigger for wanting to eat? We also need to understand why we decide to eat the foods that we eat. During our eating experience, we can take some time to notice the color and the texture of food, the taste of food, chewing the food in our mouths, not just eating it and gulping it down, but to actually experience the taste. And after we eat, experiencing the swallowing sensation. And do we feel satiated? Do we feel satiated in the body, noticing feelings of satiation? We also may start to notice that our thoughts, so a lot of times we give ourselves judgmental thoughts about how little or how much we eat. Mindful eating is about being aware of those thoughts that we're telling ourselves, and to not create strict rules per se, but to just simply notice the thoughts. And we also want to understand that mindful eating is a very pleasurable experience. It should be pleasurable. It's not just about how to nourish ourselves physically, but there is a certain amount of pleasure in it, which creates a wonderful bond between our minds and our bodies that we don't want to deny ourselves. So let's engage in a meditation practice now where we'll work on the experience of eating mindfully. To do that, we are going to eat a couple of raisins within a span of 5 minutes. What we're going to do is first make a bracha on one raisin. It's the bracha of ha'etz. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'etz. Next, I would like to invite you to gently close your eyes, sit up straight, and let's take another raisin. This time, let's spend a couple of seconds feeling the raisin in our hand, feeling the texture of the raisin. It's a little bit sticky, feels a little wrinkled. It's also soft and mushy a little bit. Noticing the texture and the way that the food feels in our hands. Although most of the time we're using a fork and knife, sometimes if we have this experience where we are eating something by hand, we can notice a texture that is really quite pleasurable. The next thing that we'd like to do is put the raisin to your lips and notice how different the sensation is around our mouths than from our hands. And finally, we're going to put the raisin in our mouths. And before we chew and swallow, we're going to let it sit there and notice how the raisin feels in our mouth. The next thing we're going to do is bite one bite into the raisin. And we'll notice how sweet and juicy just that one bite into the raisin can be. The second bite reveals more juiciness. And we chew the raisins as slowly as possible, understanding the intricacies of the eating experience. And finally, we swallow the raisin. And notice as the raisin goes down the throat into the esophagus. What we will typically do in this kind of a meditation is take a couple of more moments to eat with some additional raisins. And when we're done with that, we will gently turn our attention to the present, gently open our eyes. And thank you so much for joining us in the meditation. What this exercise does is really emphasize something called mindful eating. When we become much more aware of the subtle physical sensations in our foods, in our bodies, we just have an immensely enjoyable experience. We don't need to add salt and sugar into our diets. We can become much more aware when we're actually full because we're eating so slowly. And it's just a wonderful way to experience pleasure from something that we do every single day, multiple times a day. And I would like to invite you to choose one meal this week where you can take 15 minutes to eat your meal mindfully, or and notice or take even a couple bites mindfully and see what you notice and feel about living in the moment. Thank you so much for joining us in our mindful eating meditation and workshop. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new, and join us again next time.